King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents The Broadcasters Podcast, a weekly media commentary talking about traditional and digital media headlines and talking to the content creators out front and behind the scenes. Here is the King of Podcasts. Let's go with another Broadcasters Podcast. Thanks for being here. King of Podcasts here with you. Radio is point of contention, and we've already been talking pretty extensively about radio as of late. We talked quite a bit about what was going on last week in our episode, which was number 159, where we talked about new music doesn't matter in corporate radio and personalities no longer matter to listeners. Well, unfortunately, another study has come out and more information is coming out, indicators that are showing that radio is starting to fade. This is the year where radio is starting to feel its reckoning. And this is not something that I expected to happen so soon. But again, the pandemic really didn't do anything to radio so much, but now it is. Because of the streaming, surge that's been going on, not just in the video content, now the audio content is also starting to make a dent. Podcasting in the same way. And a number of things that are happening here that's really fascinating when it comes to radio. We're going to talk about that here on the program tonight. Also coming up a little bit later on, I'm going to be interviewing a Forbes-published multi-award-winning entrepreneur and influencer, a celebrity and brand social media manager for over 6 years with a proven track record of significantly increasing followers and engagement organically. The CEO of Brand Building PR and the co-founder of BusinessOwnersSociety.com, Sophie Bowman, will be joining me a little bit later on in a two-part interview, which I know I was praising at the end of last week in anticipation for running the interview this week. Again, one of two parts. I'll run part one tonight, and part one will most likely run next week, unless something absolutely needs my attention for the whole hour. But we're going to probably go, I'm guessing it's going to go over an hour again, just because so much to go ahead and cover when it comes to radio and streaming, which is what's important. But before I get to that, sure, I could go ahead and talk about a number of things involving some content creators that are starting to feel the brunt of cancel culture. And the names I could bring up are Morgan Wallen and Gina Carano. And Morgan Wallen was actually sometime last week, Gina Carano this week. So this is kind of mounting. And my point of this show is I want to keep it apolitical. And as you notice on this program, I'm not here to go ahead and hold anybody back or really, discourage anyone's feelings or political thoughts. It's not for me. And one of the things I did at the start of the year is I gave myself a New Year's resolution, which I'm keeping. It's not going to be hard to do. Really extricating myself from watching or viewing anything about news or politics. Because I'm at the point where the journalism that I studied to be in has changed significantly. And it's just because some of the forms of journalism, which I talked about pretty extensively going into the election here last year, free speech, freedom of thought, freedom of expression, I just can't bring myself to talk about those kind of subjects now. I've made my peace about it. I said what I was going to say about it. And I kept everything as objective as possible. But, the way things are in politics, the way things are in Los Angeles and New York and Washington, D.C., I can't bother myself to talk about it. Again, this is where I feel like with the Broadcasters Podcast, I understand there's a political correctness that we have to deal with in some cases. The political correctness is one thing I'll still continue to thump about. But when it comes to political influence, there's just not much that can be done about it. It's just there is always going to be an air of political influence that's always going to be around. And this is why what's happened with what I've been talking about as of late are the two levels of mainstream. There are two streams of mainstream culture. One that is politically charged. No doubt about it. When it comes to social, cultural, political norms, the suggested political norms, the requested political norms among corporate, among large-scale, large media conglomerates. There's that. Then there's the end that does kind of cross over into some of these platforms, but that's the social media route. That's your influencers. Your celebrities fall in the above mainstream. But this other mainstream, again, it's what is the real mainstream. The mainstream that actually people are actually following. Popular culture. The real popular culture. The real cultural movement of what's going on with our music, movies, TV, and radio. That's the area I like to cover. But then I'm also going to call out the other mainstream area where it is corporate, social, and the creativity is really just squeezed away. That major mainstream, that is, why you see rehashed and reworked projects. That is why you see, where celebrities are, you have to play along in the game. You have to speak your politics now. You just can't hold back on that anymore. You have to talk about politics. You have to talk about social and cultural norms. Maybe there are some that might not want to talk about it, but they're going to have to. Now it is a commanding of celebrities that are under this rule. If they're under contract, they're going to have to do what they have to do. There's no longer the opportunity to say, well, I don't need to really talk much about it. No, now you're being forced to. And there's still a mainstream that we don't have to watch that mainstream. There is our mainstream, the one that matters, the one that is streaming media, the one that is social media, the one that is internet digital based, which still has grassroots that can become viral and popular and cross over. That's what we like, is projects and things that will cross over, that will come into the mainstream. And they don't have to just stay in the mainstream. They come and go, just like fads, just like trends, just like everything. But that right there is where new content, new creativity lies. And there are still some people that still need to go ahead and work their way with, when I first started the show, Hollywood was still kind of a matter. But again, the pandemic has changed everything. There was a continued decline in traditional media. Now it's escalated, and we've talked about that. But again, you have to look at the numbers. We have to look at the business side, because for those corporate companies, they have, if one sector is not performing, the other one is. Okay. And then I could just say the same thing. Okay. So Morgan Wallen, guess what? All right. He is handling the situation like he's going to handle it. He's apologizing. He's asking for, his fans not to go ahead and blow back. Got it. Gina Carano, whatever you're going to say about how it was reported about the contents, or whatever there is. The bottom line is Disney Plus right now, with or without The Mandalorian going on, without Gina Carano, has 95 million subscribers. Okay? And they're not worried about it. And there's other projects they're working on as well. For one character, The Mandalorian, no matter how good she was, isn't going to be the end-all, be-all of Disney Plus. I don't know. That's not going to be enough for any kind of significant boycott to really make a difference. I don't think so. Plus, Disney Plus already put together a package for $19 where you get Hulu and ESPN Plus. So, streaming fans are going to say, you know what? It's not so much a boycott because there's so many other things I'm going to watch. Maybe I just won't watch Mandalorian. I don't know. But again, it's what they're going to decide to do. Some people are going to live off their political norms of what they feel politically is their opinions, and go for it. But I'm not going to be a part of that anymore. I didn't want to be a part of it. I was always a fence sitter. Now I really don't want to be a part of it. I want to be away from it as much as possible. So for the fact that I have to go through some of these entertainment racks, some of the media I have to go and follow along with why they influx politics into everything. I had an interview with Jeremy Burke, who works for theinsider.com, formerly Business Insider. I was actually talking to him about bringing him on this show to talk about it. But again, his area is reporting on the area of cannabis, the cannabis industry. But, we talked off air, and we were talking about, I'm not going to go into what he said, but we were talking about how, the media is very politically charged and how things are happening right now as they are. There's just this influx that politics has to be, there's money to be made in politics, talking about politics, injecting politics, or injecting social or cultural or political correctness, all of that being injected. It's a cash grab. That's what it is. If it didn't make money, I don't see how they would really do it. But there's money to be made on it. And it's also a way to go and just have something that will work. And then some people will actually, they might feel, feel a number of emotions: guilt, anger, rage, or fear. Again, but these are emotions that I don't want to go ahead and be subjected into. I don't want to be outraged. I don't want to be angered. I don't want to be feared. I don't want any of that. And I wouldn't want anybody else to do that either. This program is apolitical. Now, I know there are some media programs that are out there that are politically charged. And, those shows can continue to do what they do, and that's fine. Because, of course, they might be owned by certain companies or, certain publications. That's what they do. And that's okay, too. I will just filter through them myself. I don't need to. Most importantly, I'm not going to be able to say anything that's not already been said. And if even I did, like what I talk about on one of my podcasting, no. Those are things I wouldn't be following along in podcasting. I know what's going on because it pops up in my Twitter feed, right? You can't avoid it. Can't avoid it when I'm going through my Google News feed and it starts popping in there too, because, that's just what wants to be put out there. It's not what I customized to go and follow along with. It just popped in there and I know that's what it is. And, even when I go through TikTok videos, the algorithm, for whatever reason, will drop in videos that will have the commentary about this because it'll be the conversation that's happening. So I'll have it and I'll just flip, skip up. That's all I can do. Enough of that. So now on to the main course. And again, remember, I have my interview with Sophie Bowman coming a little bit later on. We'll talk about that. But here's a story from Variety that did catch my interest. And I'm glad that they brought this up. I'm glad we got this here to go and be talked about. Jeff Mayfield, he puts out a story that says, as streaming dominates the music world, is radio signal fading? Remember, I do put all these links on the Facebook page and on my Twitter, at King of Podcasts. And you can also find the links on the show description for every episode. So look for this as you go ahead and follow along with me as we talk about this story. Because this is kind of hitting in the ground of what I've been talking about for the last 6 months. Maybe even longer. But streaming, we knew that radio was already having a real reckoning right now. And I've been talking about that for a while. Even through the bankruptcy that iHeartMedia had. Now, not Intercom. Alpha Media now is dealing with that. And other companies, you can just see that sports radio is starting to make a little bit of a dive. Some of the other formats that are not working as well. We've talked about CHR radio taking a big hit. We talked about that last week. So here's what Jeff Mayfield writes in Variety.com. Now, AM/FM radio still owns the largest piece of America's audio pie, according to Edison Research. Their 2020 Share of Ear report says terrestrial stations account for 39% of audio consumption among those 13 and older, 18% clocked by streaming services, second among all audio segments, including podcasts, satellite radio, and owned music. So, now Edison, I don't know how much that's... I've never really get a chance to hear what the Share of Ear survey, really this annual report they do, how big of the sampling is based on it. I haven't followed back along that, but, there's that information that's out there. There's also a Music Watch report focusing solely on music listening and excluding time spent listening, or TSL, in the radio business. To news, talk, radio, podcasts, and other non-music fare, found that streaming led all sectors in the fourth quarter of 2020 with a 33.2% share. Traditional radio ranked 15.9%. And this Music Watch research also showed that streaming outperformed radio in each of the last 5 years. It's a telling tale. And that says everything. But I'm just telling you, you got to keep an eye on that. Now, here is the thing that is more telling than anything else. And this story talks about it, and I have another story to bring up just to back this up as well. At the same time, labels have been quietly thinning the ranks of their promotion teams. And a recent, relatively high-profile executive shuffle at RCA Records saw label co-president and longtime promotion influencer Joe Riccitelli exiting the company. So over the past decade, the chairman and CEO Peter Edge said, there has been a genre shift in consumer demand, and streaming has revolutionized every aspect of our business, so we must constantly adapt and iterate on our successes. Boom. This is the crux. This is what needs to be followed. The music industry is now beginning to dissuade the interest in radio promotion. They're starting to make cuts because they have to make cuts. And where are they going to make cuts? Radio. And here's the other thing, too. Because of what's going on right now, this kind of promotion, you got to ask yourself the question. Is it there going to be a point where Billboard, which of course does the chart compilations here for the industry, will they do the same thing? Will they start reconsidering the scoring of radio airplay in their charts? Because we're obviously seeing that the business of the industry is starting to make their own switch over. Again, adapt and iterate on successes. Go where the success is. It's streaming. That's where the promotion is going best. That's where, I'm just imagining again, radio's not is really not causing so many sales or really affecting so many downloads, I would imagine. It's really coming from streaming. Because digital, you could download it or you could stream it. And the downloads will count as sales. We're not getting as many physical sales as before, where radio was important. So while most executives are reluctant to speak on the record about a shift to radio promotion, one senior executive at major labels said this. This is important. And radio needs to step up and get their ears peeled as to what this radio executive is saying. Radio has morphed and changed to the point where you ask, where is consumption happening? It's happening at the streaming partners. You think about where that listener is, where they're leaning in, and you say to yourself, where do I put the resources? Radio still has value for sure. That's just a nice little say of, yeah, radio has some relevancy. And it's been like that for the last 5 years. But it's at the tail end of the consumption curve, not at the beginning. I'm going to read that again because that says everything about radio right now. And my radio brethren out here, the radio executives, if any of you are listening to this program, God forbid you do, I am saying this to you to please make changes now. You need to go ahead and overcome your corporate cohorts, and you need to realize that your jobs are next. Your jobs will be susceptible. At some point, the iHeartMedia stuff, like Bob Pittman talking about bringing up AI, buying an AI technology company to create, with robotics, create voiceovers that can be done without actual real human talent. Replacing humans with robots, basically, robotic voices. The next step. So you got to ask yourself, again, radio has morphed and changed to the point where you ask, where is consumption happening? It's happening at the streaming partners. You think about where that listener is, it's where they're leaning in, and you say to yourself, where do I put the resources? It's at the tail end of the consumption curve, not at the beginning. It says everything. And as I said, and Mr. Mayfield adequately, correctly says, is that the pandemic has exacerbated the change. Before, quote, we were like, wow, if we could hit 30 million in radio audience, that would be outstanding, says one sales and marketing executive. During COVID, some of these superstar releases at top 40 or wherever else might hit 15 to 18 million in audience, and you're still getting high fives. It just takes so much longer. And radio could go ahead and get the airplay up and be a part of the promotion, not the tail end of the consumption curve. They relish as the secondary source. And you know what part of it is why? Is because the payola is not there. They're not getting anything from it. They're not making money off the music. I got that. But you're also making no money from the advertising. So if you can't make money off of ads, why aren't you working with the music labels? Why aren't you working with them? Why don't you go ahead and take their money? Find somebody to work with them so they can do something. Why isn't some kind of collaboration going on here? The business of making records popular. Why isn't radio working alongside the music labels as they once did? During the many decades when physical sales drove the music business, radio promotion was crucial and accounted for a huge percentage of major label budgets. The rise of social media and satellite radio led some label CFOs to scrutinize promotional spending even before the shift to streaming began. And that's also because of the corporatization of radio. Because remember, decades ago, about 1995, 1996, the consolidations had already begun. The deregulation, because of the Telecommunications Act of 1986, would have already started. So even at this point, 2000s, satellite radio comes into play. And here we are. And the change from the music labels had already started 2 decades ago. Now, senior executives from 2 of the 3 majors say the chairs of their parent companies are urging their labels to reduce even more. They're saying they need to go and cut major radio promotion altogether, or to the bone. Radio, this is a warning shot. This is a red flag. This is where you need to do something here. You're going to lose that. You're going to lose it. What are you doing about it? Because the music directors, the program directors, they don't get to go and talk directly to the record labels as I used to do when I was back in the day. When I talked to A&R reps, promotion people, I got to talk to them for radio or for mixtapes or whatever it was. I could go and talk to them, and I got their records played. However small my station was, and I charted and I reported to the journals, to the trade journals, and I did that. And now that's going to be lost. Radio networks have been trimming costs as well. Between Intercom and iHeart, thousands of people over the last 18 months who are no longer having jobs. Town Square Media and Beasley Broadcasting are among the radio broadcasters that also significantly reduced their ranks, although among the top 10 radio-owned companies. Where there might have been 60 or 80 programs around the country making these decisions, it's now down between 20 and 30. One longtime promotional executive says, quote, I think it's going to shrink even more, even as a couple of the other chains consolidate. Instead of doing it on a local level, they'll do it on a national level. Which is what I said. If radio wants to continue to do what they got to do, and they can't afford to go and run stations locally, then run them as national stations. It's time to do it now. If you're going to do it, you obviously are failing at trying to create a local product. You don't have the bodies, you don't have the resources, because you failed the local markets. So all you can do now is offer local advertising and some local information with the national programming. That's all you can do at this point. No longer syndicate, it's just a national format. If that's what you have to do, that's what you have to do, okay? I mean, you remember people, there are some people that are customizing themselves, listen to music, on Spotify or Apple or Pandora. But then again, there are certain charts that everybody's listening to, and they don't mind consuming it. So Apple has their own pop chart. Spotify has today's top hits. Pandora has their list. I mean, and the Billboard Hot 100 is on Spotify, which is why I have that service. Things like that. So consequently, while the senior ranks of promotion departments remain amply staffed, there's less need for local and regional reps in a business where more and more programming decisions happen higher up the radio food chain. And one promotion veteran estimates the labels employ 20% fewer promotion heads than 5 years ago, 40% less than 10 years ago. And here's another industry observer that also makes a point. He says, quote, I've seen an exodus of promotion people over the past few years as labels concentrate more on streaming. And after iHeart and other consolidations, there are indeed fewer decision makers to talk to, plus fewer slots to work. Spotify's Today's Top Hits turns over 40 songs relatively quickly. Top 40 radio plays 18 currents at a time and holds the weekend's blind lights and power rotation for a year. Again, so there's only 18 slots, basically, in radio where you have a song that's going to be played every other hour or almost every hour, about every 90 minutes. And that's it. 18 currents. You're talking about a song that might get played, about 120 times, 115 times a week at number one, or your top 5 songs. And then your other songs underneath the top 20 or so, the other 15 songs from 5 to 20 in that particular market will get played at least 60 to 100 times. And that's what they're getting. So the exposure is limited now. And it's just not as it was before. And again, it's the tail end of the consumption curve. Very well said, that executive said that. Now, the industry shift away from sales began in earnest when Spotify launched in the U.S. in 2011. That transition could have enhanced the status of promotion departments. Instead, labels debated whether streaming services should fall under the purview of promotion or sales teams, with most opting for the latter. even though the processing of persuading a playlist editor to add a song might be similar to recording up airplay from radio, which it is. Promotion should now go towards streaming, not sales. Warner Music Nashville is one exception. They have separate teams of radio and streaming specialists in the same department. Sony Music has streaming services centralized to the sales and global digital business team. They go more into the details of this. But now, with the exception of top-level artists, radio is very rarely the place to start any fire, especially with new acts, which is why I've been thumping for the last month about Olivia Rodrigo and the song Driver's License. New act. Exactly the point. So with our superstar acts who are vying for a number 1, top 5, or top 10 debut, our radio promotion team is hand in hand with us. But the developing artist side is very much streaming first to see what we can build pools of listeners and spread it to some scale where radio picks up on it. This shouldn't be that way. Radio should be simultaneous. There is no excuse for this anymore. Radio doesn't have the option to do that anymore. If they want to be able to be a player in the market, they need to be along for the ride. They do not take the secondary market. They're not secondhand. Okay? So you'd rather not be, the major store. You'd rather not be the Amazon. You'd rather be the secondhand thrift store. You'd rather be the Goodwill. I don't know. I don't know what that whole idea is. So instead, radio has become a way to extend the life of a project, which is what they've been doing. Every major artist that comes out, Selena Gomez, Dua Lipa, the biggest week for streaming is the first week, slow decay from there, and even though it's a hit or miss, you hope that radio helps extend the life of the streaming, which only works for some artists. So here's what they brought up a little bit later on about Driver's License. So here we go. Driver's License bowed at number 1 on Billboard's Hot 100, which of course determines songs' popularity based on a combination of sales, radio airplay, and digital streams, drew 8.1 million radio audience impressions. Not bad for a song that's new to the market, but that's a drop in the bucket to the 76.1 million streams the song clocked in that same week. 8.1 million radio audience impressions. That means the major markets I told about, that same week that the song came out, was it January 8th or January 7th? And then later that week, Z100, Kiss FM, other stations started to add the song to their playlist. And audience impressions, which means that's just the audience in the market that might be listening to the song the couple of times it might have been played. Sean Ross, Vice President of Music and Programming for Edison Research, cites Rodrigo's song as proof that labels still value terrestrial radio. In 2010, Forget You by CeeLo became instantly phenomenal, and Atlantic spent the better part of a year working into radio. In 2013, Psy's Gangnam Style broke without radio, and the label still cared enough to take it to radio. So Interscope still saw radio as the next level for a song as phenomenal as Driver's License. And despite shifts in the business, radio does remain an important way for many people to discover new music. In the 2020 Infinite Dial report of Edison Research, 46% of consumers 12 and up who consider finding new music important said that radio is one of the channels where they discover fresh tunes, although it's not the most important one. YouTube is normally the most frequently cited source for music discovery at 68%, friends and family 47%, Spotify is 42%. Radio, again, the relevancy, it continues to dwindle all the time. To close out the story here, they say that radio isn't going away anytime soon. I would beg to differ about that, but again, there's changes in radio that are going on. We'll talk about that in a moment. But there's that little question that streaming has gone a long way towards leveling the playing field. Things are a lot different these days. Being on a major label or played on the radio aren't the only ways to succeed. And there you go. And they're not even talking about where TikTok comes into play and helps to boost records. They're not even talking about how Driver's License got a boost from TikTok to help get it to where it is. Though they did mention YouTube. There you go. That is a major change. The record labels are starting to look at and say, we can find a place to cut right now. And again, with the pandemic, we don't have live music coming in, merchandise, a lot of different ways to promote. We don't get, and also the promotion, we don't even have to give it to the radio stations anymore to give it away. The swag, we're not even doing that. We can go to the streamers now. We can go to something else. We can go to social media and do it ourselves, because radio was just a middleman, and radio is no longer being the proper middleman anymore. Now they're no longer the conduit. They're not even necessary. They're just like, oh, this is just this big entity of all these stations and all these resources. We don't have to do anything. We just throw them, if we need them, we'll reach out to them. Don't call us, we'll call you. That's basically what they're doing. Variety and Jeff Mayfield, excellent story. This is important for all of you out there to realize that radio is undergoing changes, and this, more than anything else, says everything. And not too long before that story came out, Billboard also put out a story that also kind of gained the same story that also backed up the fact of the music labels. So Billboard reported how radio consolidation may spell changes for label promo departments. And there we go. Let's go and talk about that real quick. This is going back a month ago because I didn't get the chance to read this yet, but I finally got a chance to catch the article because Billboard's paywalls, whatever. Now, Skip Bishop, who's a former Sony production executive in Nashville, he runs his own consultancy called Studio to Be Entertainment, says that, radio promotion executives always were the titans of going around the country to convince programmers from Miami to Milwaukee to play the next new single they're working on. It used to be, can we bring the artist in and put him on a Ferris wheel with the morning show? Well, it's not about that anymore, they said. And the fact that they're saying that there aren't as many programmers anymore, and that the pandemic has supercharged radio consolidation. iHeartMedia, Entercom, and other big radio companies are gradually replacing local personalities with syndicated shows and remote DJs recorded elsewhere. So label promotion departments will focus on fewer programmers, mostly in big cities. And that's what we're talking about. In the radio side, iHeart put out a statement when they had laid off over 100 programming staffers in November. They said, quote, listeners care about what our personalities are saying, not where they're sitting. Oh, that's pretty nice. Very comforting. And while some of its rivals like Entercom and Town Square Media said they're committed to a live and local approach, they're also sharing on-air talent among different stations. Some at labels believe that broadcast changes are unlikely to change how promotion executives do business, especially post-pandemic. The idea of slashing promotion staff, say as a major label source, is kind of like a very Chicken Little kind of thing, of kind of scoffing notion. Sure, there's a reaction to centralized programming, but it's to be simply prepared for it. And another source talks about that radio remains nearly as important as always for breaking artists and tracks. These days, hit songs happen on the radio playlists and streaming playlists at the same time. And this is the head of pop and radio promotion and radio strategy at Crush Music, which manages Lord, Sia, Green Day, and others. But that's a very, very odd thing for him to go and say. Hit songs happen on the radio playlists and streaming playlists at the same time. But again, it's a first market and a secondary market, Eric. But he does acknowledge that radio is not first base anymore, with the continuous rise of streaming and social media. He also says it's so centralized, quote, you're really dealing with the opinions of 1, 2, 3, or 4 people at a chain. All this was going to happen in the last 2 years anyway, but COVID sped everything up. And there we go. Another person who was GM of Monotone, which manages Jack White, Vampire Weekend, and others, says that the pandemic has shown labels and management companies can save millions upon millions of dollars, keeping people at home. And while he looks forward, Matt Pollock said this, who was a GM of Monotone, he said also that, he looks forward to the day when promotion executives can begin to meet with programmers in person. We don't need to be flying around. We don't need to do the way that we did, which is another point to be said. Very important to be said there, or what he's been explaining right there. But here's another thing that's happening that's a very interesting move on behalf of iHeartMedia. This happened just today as I'm recording February 11th. Global's Tabor family. Global Media is one of the major for-profit competitors in the UK. So Global Radio, they own a number of stations there, and they are national formatted. They do a lot of national formatted stations. And let's talk about this. So Michael Tabor, the investment mogul behind the British radio and outdoor media Global, has taken a stake. And also Global is also a TV product. And I believe they do radio in Canada as well, if I'm correct. So Michael Tabor and his work with Global, they've taken a stake of almost 9% in its bigger U.S. audio rival, iHeartMedia. So now they have 9% of the market. And they spent $117.6 million to acquire the 8.8% investment in iHeartMedia at the end of January. Now, as you know, iHeartMedia is the biggest commercial operator in the U.S., 850 stations, 160 markets, revenues of $3.68 billion in 2019, and that's 3 times the size of Global Media Entertainment, the UK parent company of Global, the biggest media owner in commercial radio, second biggest in outdoor in the UK, and both companies have said in their financial results that revenues have fallen because of COVID-19. They go and talk about the issues with debt problems with iHeartMedia. They go into that. And also talked about that they were trying to make themselves more, iHeartMedia was trying to make themselves more attractive to investors in November 2020 when it received authorization from the FCC that allows the company to increase foreign ownership to up to 100% of its shares. So if they can find somebody that'll buy them, they'll do it. And that's the idea. And this is also after Liberty Media wanted to go and buy a bigger piece of their company, but they did not. So there you go. And what I got to ask myself is like, okay, why are they going to buying into iHeartMedia, and what are they going to be doing? So Gil Hind, who's Chief Operating Officer at Enders Analysis, said, quote, "You got to question where Global can go now in the UK. There's no more room to grow, and it can't take any more market share in radio. The U.S. is the biggest market, and iHeartMedia is doing some interesting things with podcasts. But unless there's a way of getting more control, you have to question what's the benefit for the family. And I don't know what that's going to be. But again, with Global, you know, I would like if they actually had some influence into what they did in the radio part. Because I think what they do and necessarily what they do with the radio end is not too bad. So, for instance, in the contemporary hit radio side, they have a brand called Capital FM, which is owned by Global. Then they also have other things. We have Radio X, which is more of an alternative label for them. So they do programming that actually really does go out. LBC is a popular talk radio format, and they have other things in the same way. Capital has a dance channel, and there's other things that they have. So in theirs, they have national formatted stations. So, for instance, Capital FM is their nationally broadcast format, which I've talked about before, that Capital runs on various stations around the country and in the UK on various frequencies in different markets. And that they also provide some windows for local programming. Okay. Then they have Heart, which is more of a, more, I guess you could say as a soft AC. There's Smooth Radio, which is also in the same vein. Capital Extra, which is a hip-hop format, hip-hop and R&B format. They have Radio X, which is more their alternative. Capital Dance. They also have Gold, which is, I believe, that's their oldies format. So they're good at doing this kind of programming. What I would like to see happen is once they're kind of brought in here, I'd like to be able to go and see if they're going to do something where they're going to go ahead and bring their programming knowledge over to the U.S. And that some of the people that are going to be working there, because they're going to have a significant share of iHeartMedia in terms of stocks, they should have some kind of say in the change of programming. So that will be a good thing if they do. And we know there's been some attempts to try to do that. We know Cumulus tried to do that with Nash, and we're very unsuccessful at it. And we've seen other attempts at doing like this before. Going back to the early 80s, it was Super Radio as the first thought of format. And there's other things that go out there, like there's the True Oldies channel that Scott Shannon runs, and he's trying to do that where he has it, but it's also in small market stations. Not a lot of big markets have that format. And there's other formats like that where Westwood One has their own couple of formats, and ABC Radio has their formats, and so they can run them on smaller stations, kind of just as filler. But this is for larger markets. So if Global's able to go and take the kind of format they have here and start changing some of these stations around, I actually like that idea. But again, they're also good at least finding talent to go ahead and bring on board and trying to get some good, compelling programming, because in the UK, it's just a much different way of programming. Again, they're going against BBC, and they're a decent competitor against the BBC in all their facets. And, again, commercial versus government owned. And it's quite a competition over there, as a matter of fact. So I give them credit there. But, the one thing with Global is they're into the game later as compared to BBC, who's been around for, years. So BBC has a much longer run, but the BBC has been smart to go and also continue to go and change with the times. They've always been smart about that. So they have not become, they're absolutely the establishment, but they're not the establishment where they cannot be brought into the play. So there's that. So iHeartMedia really doesn't need anything to do with the podcasting. I think what Global's doing right now is going to be significant what they can do to help the failing radio sector of the company. And that's what I hope they're going to be able to do. So that might be a promising thing that happens. But again, that's not going to answer for all the radio stations out there. That's not going to answer for everyone out there. There's too many different stations to save, and they can't all be saved. But this is why we need something to happen where local programmers get these stations back. If the other companies can't hold on to them, then there you go. So, iHeartMedia, what if they become a juggernaut? They become the monopoly again, and the other stations can't hold up. Intercom and Alpha Media and Town Square and Beasley and others. What happens to them? They could just go by the wayside, for all we know. Just keep that in mind. I have a couple other stories I could have gotten to, but I'm going to hold those up probably for when I'm not podcasting and just leave it there. So we're going to move along to my featured interview once again. It is Sophie Bowman, CEO of Branding PR LLC and co-founder of BusinessOwnersSociety.com. I really love this interview. She is bubbly. She's got great personality. She doesn't hold back. And I really enjoyed my conversation with Sophie. I know you will too. Go ahead and check it out. I'm going to go and play for you right now the first part, about 31 minutes worth. And I'll come back to you very shortly after that. Enjoy my interview with Sophie Bowman here on the Broadcasters Podcast. Interview time here on the Broadcasters Podcast. My guest is a Forbes-published multi-award winning entrepreneur and influencer. She's been a celebrity and brand social media manager. You thought I was just going to say celebrity, huh? No. Celebrity and brand social media manager for over 6 years. You can't tell, but she also has a proven track record of significantly increasing followers and engagement organically. I'm here with the CEO of Branding PR LLC. Twisting the tongue as we speak. Also the co-founder of BusinessOwnersSociety.com, Sophie Bowman. Sophie, thanks for being on.
Thank you for having me.
So you were talking about we were getting on the line here, and where you definitely have what you think of yourself, and if you needed a time to really feel inspired or to feel motivated or to pump the ego, you're getting that today from the show. So just look forward to that, right? That's what we do on this program. So anyway, Sophie, I want to get started and ask you now, you have been featured as an industry expert giving advice to millions of performers and actors on how to use social media to build their online presence and win more jobs with entertainment powerhouse platform Backstage. Mm-hmm. Now, with some of these aspiring actors and performers that you're talking to, do they feel like they're better served in some cases these days? Because now we have influencer marketing, and this is something I've gone as an underlying subject, because I feel like celebrities, because of how the pandemic has really played things out, celebrities might not be where people want to go. Because if we're doing so much online, the digital disruption we have is prominent and much more than ever because of the pandemic. Do you think that people look at Hollywood or Broadway and say, you know what, I can keep it online and I can make myself famous?
Yeah. To be honest, I think, I had this conversation yesterday that even when things go back to, normal, whatever, I don't think people have quite figured out yet. Like, it's never going to go back to the way the world was.
Right.
Things are going to be better and, hopefully we're not going to have to wear masks and stuff. But, why would business owners, which is something I've been saying for 9 years, because I got to, work from home, travel the world, do whatever. Why on earth now would a business owner really want to, pay that money to go and have an office or whatever? Like, obviously for certain things like film studios, they are still going to have something. But at the same time, you know, influencer marketing allegedly was supposed to be dying. But now we've seen the pandemic, it's bigger than ever. So it's just going to keep going up. And, you know, with things like I was saying with when I was talking to Backstage about it, is everyone is expected to be an influencer. For example, you know, a bar or a nightclub is not going to book a DJ unless they have a significant following. It doesn't make any sense to them. You know, in the same way, like anything now, if you get booked as an actor, they probably want to see before they book you, you know, in an actual theater or whatever, that you have some kind of following, because otherwise no one's coming to see the show. It's all about the money, and it's all about how many people know about you and want to see you.
So for reference to the audience, Backstage, that's a pretty big industry rag for those that are aspiring or actors, actresses looking to find auditions, looking to find acting coaches, and all that kind of information is there. And the one thing is what you did say is that influencers were affected by the pandemic because, first of all, some of those influencers would travel or they would go out and do fashion, and they would do a lot of photo shoots, do a lot of things where they would get themselves noticed and go out to different locales and really be seen and noticed. But then they had to go ahead and refine their way back into how are they going to be able to do this within their own confines and still continue to be relevant. So there was a lot of creativity that had to be done right there. But when it comes to celebrities, when it comes to Broadway performers, that's harder because the glamour is all taken away. Like, the glamour can still be done for these influencers, but then what made these people in front of a camera or on a stage made them relevant and made them larger than life. That larger than life aspect behind a Zoom camera, looking without makeup and not even dressed, just took away everything that people thought about it.
Yep. Yeah, it's changed massively. You know, it's weird because I think I always try and focus on like positives and opportunities. So from my perspective, you know, if there was someone that lived in Alaska, for example, that wanted to be, you know, an actress,
yeah,
they would have to fly to New York or somewhere, you know, to audition. Now they don't have to do that anymore because we're now seeing apps start to pop up, like the Movie Something app, where you can literally, you know, audition from your home.
Right.
So.
But then also, too, I just think people like the fact that they don't want to be controlled. I think the autonomy of saying I can still control what's going on with me, and then I don't need to be bossed around by somebody in Hollywood or Broadway.
Yeah, pretty much. You know, things are changing. I think the most positive part of this whole movement is I've heard so many people, and we've seen it everywhere, you know, saying, you know, we're going to take more care of our mental health now that we've actually spent time to be at home with our families,
yep.
All of this stuff, like, fuck going back to that 70-hour work week.
Exactly. And especially you can do the 70-hour work week at home, which I like. And it's nice to not have to, you know, take those extra hours of commute or whatever things I had to do and just take that away and take them back. It is nice.
Exactly. And that's the difference, you know, like, I mean, there's no getting around the fact that we're still working crazy hours, especially as entrepreneurs, business owners, talent, whatever. But at the same time, it's a lot less offensive and aggressive when you're at home. You do it in your own kind of, you know, thing. You're not having road rage in the morning. You're not getting stuck in traffic on the way home. Like, all of these things just make a different kind of level of peace.
I want to go into your background to give a lot of context to those. Just to show why it was such a big thing about having you on here and be able to talk to us about what you were able to go and bring when it comes to marketing, when it comes to PR, when it comes to social media, when it comes to just influencer marketing, and even more than that. So your first part is your first business was a global entertainment agency, nominated for 3 prestigious business awards, including Business Innovation, was selected as one of 6 companies to be showcased by Richard Branson of Virgin fame for his Back of an Envelope campaign. You were also a mentor and guest judge on the Young Enterprise and Entrepreneurial Program for young people in schools and colleges across the UK, official member of the Forbes Agency Council, a Marcom Award winner, recognizing you as the best social media influencer, building awareness for local businesses, and now you're educating in Miami. You're teaching advertising students all the social media tricks of the trade. So you've done all this. But here's the thing, is that when most people think of educators, you know, they never think about the fact of, am I going to have the person that's going to be teaching me to get me ready for the future of the business I'm going into in the career, that they have actual career experience, like the adjuncts. I prefer adjuncts that have the hands-on experience, current knowledge that is better than any school book, any textbook could possibly give.
100%. I mean, I think every school is guilty of it. And even in the UK, we'd have like someone teaching business or PR, and they would, when I was studying at university, they'd pull out, Dave has a food truck. If you buy, you know what I mean? Like, I want to learn about that. I want to learn about like the business, the exciting stuff. And you could tell these people had no experience. Like, you've been a teacher for 50 years. So how did, Anyway, that's a whole nother rant.
Oh, but listen, if you want the best example, the movie Back to School, Rodney Dangerfield, when he's doing the first class on economics, and the professor's asking about creating a widget and creating this community, and basically the end of it, he says, yeah, why don't we just create Fantasyland? It's like, that's exactly what it is. It's a great part of the movie. Just saying.
It is.
But it's an out-of-touch professor trying to talk to somebody, in that case, that was just wanting to get educated and have a college education, but already having success in the role of that movie, the way it was portrayed, that character.
And honestly, you want, it's the same way they say to entrepreneurs or business owners, like, dream big and don't listen to anyone that hasn't walked your path. Because, people will tell you, don't start a business or don't do this, don't go after your dreams in whatever capacity. But yet, I'll just use the teacher as an example again. You've been a teacher for 40, 50 years, so what would you know? You know what I mean? Like, I think with stuff like that, you just have to, carve your own path. And I think that's what's been really interesting about COVID is we're seeing like people are crashing and burning, or people are just absolutely, killing it.
Because there's some things with educators, especially in media, that are still trying to choose. So like if you're going in for theater, you're going for drama, you're going for journalism, there are still tried and true, practices that you should instill that are traditional that would still be done. But again, if they are not paying attention to this digital disruption, when it comes to what you can do in terms of being a performer, what is the modern culture accepting these days? In journalism, what is it that you're not doing? There's subjective journalism, but there's a new style of it now that's much more sensationalistic, much more know who, what, when, where, and why. It's more about in your face. Let's get the salacious, shocking, tabloidistic type of yellow journalism that's becoming much more common because of what the internet creates. Mm-hmm. Now, I want to ask you about your background, because obviously you've worked with a lot of great names. So you've 17 years worked in PR, working with various celebrities and global brands on their marketing campaigns. John Legend, who we've seen a lot in the news, Kanye West, a current presidential candidate, as we record this on Election Day, and Jean-Paul Gaultier. Exchange for Media, I want to talk to you about something with this as I bring up the PR story. So Exchange for Media recently wrote, quote, industry players say with the heralding of the festive season, brands will look to create influencer marketing campaigns, and PR firms will be key in vetting of influencers. According to the World PR Report for 2020, influencer marketing will witness an upsurge in PR investment, followed by multimedia content creation. Now, I asked another question, the same question to another PR specialist just in the last week. I wanted to ask you the same question. Do you see the times are changing to where the value of an influencer's reach to a large audience becomes more viable than, say, a PR person like yourself? Would you look to go to an influencer to work on a marketing campaign than, say, go to the agency, go to the studio, the managers, the large upfront fees, and the red tape to get a famous celebrity, regardless if they're at their peak or not?
Mm-hmm. Honestly, so I guess I'm slightly different because although I still, I have my creative agency, I'm focusing more now on Next Gen, Next Gen Plus, which is part of, businessownersociety.com. Plug.
Right.
I'm going to do that every time.
Do it. Do it. I'm not stopping you.
Friday when the guy was like, message. Yeah. So I think, as it's weird because I built my social media to prove that, I actually know what I'm talking about, because I got sick of, businesses. Well, I don't know if we want to hire you because the last person we hired just posted 5 times a day and we didn't grow and blah, blah, blah.
But the difference is you are your own influencer. You practice what you preach.
Yeah, that became my side hustle. That really took off. And then it opens so many doors. So although I don't really do that much PR anymore, I handle my own, which probably just answers the question for you.
Oh, but I'm sure you're looked after sometimes. Like after all that experience, I'm sure you still get phone calls.
Honestly,
maybe you don't ask about PR, but they're asking something very similar.
Yeah, I do get asked to write, press releases, or I'll get asked to handle the PR for certain brands. But for the most part, I don't do it anymore because, if it's going to be a matter of right now, brands don't have a lot of money to put. I'm not going to be working 10, 20 hours a week for someone that can only afford to pay like $1,000 a month. That doesn't make sense. I can make that sitting at home doing nothing pretty much. So...
But it's funny how some people, like I've had other people that have done in the same vein, their own influencer, and it's almost as if, well, in some cases, there's the bar I have. The bar I need to raise is who's going to make more money than I can myself, by myself.
Exactly. I mean, I do, so I have representation as in like I have, an agent, but in terms of like the actual PR, I mean... we kind of know that magazines died a bit. PR is still very relevant. If you have the budget for it, it's really, really relevant. But, if you're a small business and you only have like, let's say $3,000, $4,000 a month or less to invest, it's not worth the budget. You can do it yourself, or you can find, a freelancer that will do it at half the price.
So now, how long ago did you move here from the UK?
4 years.
And in that market, obviously pop culture is intensified over there. And there's a lot of crossover that comes over because America just is always second. I always feel like when it comes to music, when it comes to television in some cases, because I think UK has always been the trendsetter. I mean, the reason we have shows that we feature on streaming channels like Netflix, the 13 to 10 episode arcs, the series that we have on a regular basis, that is taken exactly from what the UK has done. The way that we consume our content, the music that we get in some cases, that really does stand out virally online, as opposed to what the corporate commercial types are going to put out there. There's something to be said about that. Like when you look at what is the difference between what you were doing in Europe and the UK in particular, and then over here, what do you see as a difference? Do you always feel like where the U.S. might be always a couple of steps behind?
It's interesting because when I was living in the UK, I thought it was the other way around. We always thought America was the leaders, but then when I moved here, I was honestly kind of shocked. Like they were, well-known brands or like restaurants, whatever, where I frequent a lot in, Las Olas, that didn't have a clue about how to do social media or didn't even have a presence. I'm like, in the UK, probably even the guy that owns, the corner, the shop or whatever, he has a presence.
Right.
That was probably the most surprising aspect. But at the same time, it's really worked out for me because, me being able to bring all these things, especially when I first started out with the PR, the marketing, the social media, the influencer stuff, combining all that, you're not going to find that in another one person. I mean, you might, but I'm yet to meet anyone that does everything that I've done.
There you go. I love the confidence. And also, it's one thing I'll tell you this as well, because influencers are something very important. And this is also going on to the same article from an article that was written in Forbes, not yours, but someone else I read about. Regardless of how you define or view a social influencer, one thing is clear. An influencer has the power to influence or persuade an audience. Yep. Now, one of the things you're doing right now is, you're not just taking, obviously, you've changed the monetization model. You're going on the route that, I definitely can understand why you do. It's almost more of a, well, you're much more of like a maven, I guess. It's kind of the, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, you're kind of prophesizing now what you're doing with what you've done in influencer marketing. Because right now you're offering a course on how to become a paid Instagram influencer, giving a step-by-step guide on how you can implement yourself so you can become a paid influencer in 30 days. So I want to know about the idea of where you're putting yourself out there and taking the route as the evangelist for influencer marketing. And, take a minute to also talk about this particular paid program that you're doing and offering your work in influencer marketing and what you need to make the cut to even do something like this.
Interesting. I mean, that one, honestly, like, you would be surprised that really didn't sell much because I didn't market it. Because I kind of changed direction. You know, for the first time ever, I listened to the gossip that influencer marketing was going to die. So I didn't really focus too much on it. And then look what happened. So, I have no shame in my game about admitting, my mistakes or whatever. But I decided anyway, I wanted to kind of move focus a little bit. So I just kind of rebranded. I'm going to be focusing more on helping automotive and aviation brands doing their social media, but very, niche, like helping them build fans via doing social media contests, because that is the ultimate. I have my little special recipe for that, which doesn't require any kind of money, obviously apart from my payment.
Right.
But I tried it out on a celebrity client, and we gave away something. And, I'd set up all this stuff, and the only investment was $200. We got 63,000 additional hits on the website in one day, and then 900 emails on the database. Those emails, obviously, we retargeted. So we made a lot of money that week.
One thing I'll tell you, from some of the PR people I've talked to, because we do, I get the contact because a lot of people want, have guests or clients they want to bring on to some of the full-time projects I work at, whether it's cannabis radio. One of the in the PR firm right now, cannabis is one sector that almost like I feel like every PR firm has to have a cannabis client these days. Humble, and not so much self-deprecating, but also just being like almost a self-humiliation. Just it really, ingrandizing. What's the word I'm saying? Ingratiating, that you really do, you humanize yourself. You're not just this person that's just putting together a machine that's just going to put somebody out there. I like that you just make yourself how real you put yourself out there. And I feel like you try to put the most honest representation of you out there to present yourself as an influencer the same way you would want to have the people you represent do that same kind of branding and marketing and placing of themselves. Almost like, what's not a reality show host or a celebrity on the reality show.
It's
taking away the fake. Taking away the fakeness.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, people see through bullshit. So even when the trend became talking about authenticity the last year, a lot of people are still not that. Whereas a blogger that I met at the Ritz-Carlton in the Grand Cayman Islands, the blogger was 4 years old, and she makes more money than probably all of us combined. So her mom started filming her and her sister, and something went viral for, whatever reason. And I actually completely forgot the point of what I was saying. Oh, no,
you said this 4-year-old influencer making more money than we could make combined.
Well, that part. Oh, yeah. So with the authenticity factor, the mum posted stuff like, the behind the scenes, so what actually happened before they recorded the video. So like one kid bit the other kid, or whatever. Like that's real shit, and people love it. Like now I got into the habit of like earlier today I was on a photo shoot. We went to 3 different locations. I changed outfit like 4 times. I was in a ball gown, and we were trying to film me doing like a slow-mo walking away, whatever, towards the ocean.
Right.
And tripped over. So it's like, you know what? Fuck it. I'll end up posting that just because, it is what it is. Or like the other day, I was recording a video for something or other, and I had so many. It took me like 90 takes, I swear to God, to get this 15-second video without saying anything stupid or, whatever. And there was one where in the end I just had a breakdown and started yelling, fuck. And people love it because they're like, yeah, we can relate. It's definitely, I think my big thing anyway is like I used to try and play it safe, in some certain level of how I thought I should look or dress or act. But then in March, I think I turned 36. I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I don't have the patience anymore. People are going to find out who you are anyway, so you might as well just show them. Well,
you don't have to tell me your age. I could have just believed you're under 30. I'm just saying, but
Oh, thank you.
You're very welcome. Honestly, there again, authenticity. But it's a good point to make because the truth is, I want this a little bit of a tangent, but when I look at what people are asking for of Hollywood, of Broadway, having a different representation, a different makeup of people, so diversity, equity, inclusion, hot button subject. But the truth is, that is wonderful, but that should come in conjunction with finding authentic people with new creative ideas.
Yeah, 100%.
Because it's, again, merit and performance, but that's one thing I think and I really think about until you brought this up, is the fact that we want people that are authentic. They're not fake. I mean, I think the best people that ever run businesses are the ones that you can find some authenticity from if they're the CEO of a company. And you know what? They're a little bit recluse. They're a little bit obnoxious or bombastic, as we might hear it. There's something about that people can relate to. And you become approachable. You become likable. That's the breaking of the ice without even have to meet that person in person.
Yeah, well, it's just kind of like, I've always kind of rebelled against everything anyway since I was young.
Nonconformity, I love it. That's me too, man.
I was definitely always rebellious. So when people say, no, you have to, Instagram has to be like this. Or I got turned away by so many brands years ago because, it was just whatever. I mean, yeah, my photography skills were not great, but it was posting as is. If a brand sends me, liquor or whatever, I'm not going to stand there and talk about it for an hour about the taste or whatever. I'm not going to make a cocktail with it, probably. If anything, I'll just go with however I feel at the second, probably just drink straight from the bottle.
Right. But you know what? It's what we don't see enough of. But people don't have the balls to do that either.
Yeah, I mean, I do have pretty big lady balls. This is why, I think this is one of the many reasons why I will forever be single, because I'm too aggressive for guys. They can't, especially in no disrespect, but American guys really cannot handle me. It's
psychology. You know what? I've been reading a lot of Audible books, listening to a lot of Audible books. But my thing is, because I've been single for a long time too. But I'm sure my story is much different than yours. Bottom line is that for someone to be someone to go and attach to you, there has to be somebody that understands the same wavelength, the same emotional wavelength. They can sub-communicate and communicate and not get deterred by it. And I think that's the other thing, is that people are very sensitive these days. That's the same thing goes, not just relationships, but also just when you're networking. That people just can't just break things down. I mean, oh my God forbid, if I take a drink, if I'm going to be a little bit woozy afterwards, if I might say something out of line. No, who gives a shit? Just say it.
Oh God. And then there comes me so many times, like there'll be like, a smart event or something, and I probably hit the free bar, ended up jumping in the ocean and then walked back through the party. Hey guys.
But the thing is, you've also not worked in corporate environment. You've been doing your own thing. You've controlled your own destiny.
Well, the thing, I had to, because there's no way I would have been employed in corporate. I mean, I work with corporate brands, but again, it works for me because I'm so different. But
you're also shattering the way the corporate needs to be, because you're telling them, listen, I know what's best for you. And that's what you're doing to them, because they're obviously will come back with something that's already been done before. You're saying, no, fuck that. I have this idea for you. This will work. Look at my track record. And that's what you do. See, with my bosses I work for, our thing is, number one, we always want to work with people that we like. We don't want to work with people that are going to be tough or difficult or not. We can't budge. Corporate's tough. So I can imagine what you go through trying to get some people in a boardroom that kind of makes sense. I think about the fact of, now, the other thing, too, I can imagine, and I had one guest, Brant Pinvidic. He's the person that was kind of the pitch guy, developed and produced shows like Bar Rescue or Extreme Makeover Wedding Edition or Weight Loss Edition, excuse me, and most notably Biggest Loser. So with him, it was a matter of, to get through these corporate suits and get something through their head was short attention span. Keep your presentation 3 minutes or less. So it was about getting the word to them, cutting through the bullshit, and letting them know what was in their best intentions, which I guarantee that's probably why some of the best ad agencies out there, they figure out how to do that, because you have people that are absolutely out of touch. You have to have a real creative mind. And then some people are going to say, you know what? We need to listen to what Sophie says.
Oh, that's a scary thought. Sophie for president. I mean,
days, you never know, right?
I feel like I would have a chance.
But that is actually, that would be, I'm just giving you Brandon right there, what Sophie says.
Oh, I like that.
That's, I mean, not to, get copyright infringement for saying Sophie's Choice or something like that, but of course.
Oh, God, no.
The movie, no.
Yeah, no. What Sophie says, I think I should start hashtagging that. I like it.
What Sophie says. Absolutely.
Sophie says. I mean, yeah, a lot of brands have, I understand corporate brands are a little bit more, scared, but I actually did work with a corporate brand here for 2.5, 3 years. They were a client. But I never had a problem. They never said no to me for anything. And I found a way to speed the process of getting stuff approved. And I don't know if it's just an aggression thing in meetings.
But that's good. That's what you have to be. It's like, you have to be a bulldozer. You have to push across and cut through whatever kind of predetermined ideas they have and just shut them down.
You do. And I think, when you get to a certain point of proving yourself, I don't have to take shit from anyone. I could, walk out of this room and go get another 4 clients like you in a second and they know it. So, in terms of, I think one thing that's slightly different as well is unless, I've had to work with employees that have just been lazy and shit and just do stupid stuff all the time.
Yeah.
I'm actually genuinely nice to everyone, no matter who they are, what level. So I think that's made a big difference because when you're like that and you're nice with everyone, clients, whoever it is, you kind of get that good karma back. And it's the same with my business partner, Next Gen Boss. She's like that as well. Her and her husband are the nicest people ever. And they always do stuff to help people. They're always volunteering. So, it's all about that good karma. So Fusion came from years ago that, women in business have to be dressed this certain way and they have to be a complete bitch to everyone. That really fucked up a lot of, what younger people understand. So I think I got asked to talk more and more and more because they wanted to see, okay, not everyone is an asshole. You can get to a certain level by actually being nice to people, being creative. And that's why I actually Miami Ed School a lot. I spoke with them as an industry hero many, many times. And I really love them because they don't have that same curriculum. And like you were saying before, they actually bring in real teachers that still work currently at, places like Zimmerman or all these agencies or Mother. So, I think there's a lot to be said for having some kind of direction, but what a lot of people don't know, I've said it in interviews before, is I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I was winging it.
But I'll tell you, the most important thing is this goes to the content creators I talk to on this program. That's the kind of attitude you have to have when it comes to trying to get yourself noticed, get yourself in an audition, putting out a screenplay or a script, or trying to get a project off the ground. Yeah. That's the kind of attitude you got to have. And come back for part 2 of my interview with Sophie Bowman next week here on the Broadcasters Podcast. We'll talk about that. And I'm sure some other things will be coming up. And, I know Valentine's Day is coming up right now for everybody that's going to be listening to the program, or it'll just be right after. Have a happy Valentine's Day. I don't celebrate it, but, it doesn't mean that you all can't enjoy the wonderful commercialization of the holiday itself, which is basically a Hallmark holiday. We all know that. Anyway, come back for another Broadcasters Podcast. And please remember that content is king and the control of your content is in your hands.
Thank you for listening to the Broadcasters Podcast. Find all the links to subscribe to the show by going to broadcasterspodcast.com. And don't forget to check out the King of Podcasts wrestling program, the Wrestling is Real podcast, exclusively at wrestlingisreal.com.